afternoon. Hi, it's Lizette. I'm from Think Different Dementia and I am an occupational therapist. This is the Alzheimer's and Dementia Support Group. I tried to live stream this last week in two groups, and guess what? You can only do it in one. So I'm here. It's Saturday, almost December. November the 14th, 2020. And like I said again, this is the Alzheimer's and Dementia Support Group. My name is Lizette. I am an occupational therapist, and my background is an occupational therapist, but really my love and my passion is I work with people with dementia, and I love to teach people about dementia, and I'm here to serve you for 1 hour. I've been doing this, oh gosh, I think this is the 5th week or the 6th week where I've been coming on live. Hi, Gina. Good to see you. Thank you for commenting something. I know someone's out there now. I've been doing this about 4 or 5, maybe 6 weeks now since the beginning of October, and I thoroughly enjoy it. I get a lot of good questions. I do not know the answers to all of the questions, but I wing it, and I try to make sure that I tag people afterwards on the questions. Today we don't have that many questions. I only have 2 or 3 questions that people gave. But I wanted to share something this afternoon. I think it's kind of important to be transparent and share with you guys what's going on in my life. I have mentioned this before. My mom actually has the start of what I would call vascular dementia. I haven't formally staged her, but she seems to be trending towards the moderate dementia range. And a few weeks ago, in September, middle of September, the 19th of September, my sister was here for my 50th birthday. Woohoo! So anyway, my sister came and we were able to have long conversations and dialogues with my parents regarding their own setup at home, etc. And what was very interesting is that my brother-in-law, his mom had passed away not too long. Well, it's been about 4 years now, but he's still struggling to try and get his mother's affairs in order and trying to help his dad all the way from here to South Africa. So, that's got its own unique challenges, right? But in any case, so we kind of started to ask my parents, who are 73 and 74, where are their wills? Tell us where to find things so when something happens to dad, we can take care of mom, or vice versa. And come to find out, I found out that I thought that they had all their paperwork in order, and actually they don't. So that was kind of an eye-opener for me. So I was wanting to share that with you guys this afternoon, just so that you know that we really need to be more proactive with our own parents and our own selves regarding our final affairs, our paperwork, things like a will, things like a living will if you want to have a living will, things like a durable power of attorney for healthcare decisions. Somebody needs to be a power of attorney for financial decisions. And what was interesting, and we actually had a Zoom call meeting with an attorney. I was at my mom and dad's house. My sister was on, her husband was on, my husband was on. We were all together and very transparent about what we were trying to set up. And what was really interesting to me is that my parents, they've been married for 50 years. My dad knows my mom is having trouble with her thinking, and he's like, well, put mom down as my durable power of attorney for healthcare decisions, and put mom down for all of this stuff. And I'm like, I went to the kitchen with him later on, and I'm like, Dad, you can't do that anymore. Mom is not capable of making these decisions for you. So even though, they know a lot and they're educated people, and I'm a therapist, for heaven's sakes, my sister's a qualified attorney, we also don't always have a handle on exactly what to do and how to structure things and so on. So my encouragement to anybody who listens to this is, please don't be afraid to have those conversations with your parents. You need to know where they're, if, or your loved one. I mean, hopefully if you're a spouse taking care of somebody, you know what's going on in that arena. But if you're taking care of your parents, or you're taking care of a brother or a sister or a sibling or an aunt or an uncle, whatever, somebody has to have these conversations with them. We need to make sure that they have their a living will if they don't want to have like a peg tube put in, or they want a natural death, whatever. That's what a living will is. You want to make sure that they have a healthcare power of attorney in order for them to be able to, if something happens, have somebody who is going to be the decision maker. And don't wait too late, because if they get to the point where, say for example, they are admitted to a hospital and you let things go, and it is like, whoa, obvious, Houston, we have a problem, to the hospital, you actually have to go to court to then become a decision maker for your own parent or loved one if you don't have this document in place. So I beg you, yes, it costs some money to get this stuff set up. It is well worth it in the long run. I think it's even well worth it in the short run, because if you have to go to court and you have to have somebody declared incompetent to make their own decisions, like they get admitted to the hospital and they don't have any of this documentation in place, the hospital actually becomes the conservator until the stuff is sorted out. I've had patients in the hospital for almost a year as it's going through the court system, and what a way to live or not live. So I beg you, take a page out of my book. Work on your loved ones' affairs. Don't be afraid to talk to them about it. It's much easier if you all sit down and talk about it, because then you know what you need to do. And now I can help my parents, and we can all get on the same page. So, all right. Anybody who has any questions out there, Gina, if you have a question, throw it on. I love answering questions. But to start with, I'm going to just answer a couple of the questions. Like I said, I only have two or three questions. So please, somebody put some questions in there, so when I get done with these, I'm not floundering like I did that one week, which is all good. And if it's a short day today, then it's a short day today. It's all perfect. So Jack had a question. So what does the word cognition really include? Then his comment was, loss of memory seems to be something different. He says he and his wife can sit and discuss a whole host of things, and his wife is still pretty logical in her thinking and processing, but sometimes the conclusions don't stick. So I think that's a super great question. So cognition. When I think of cognition, I think of everything. Cognition, that's a global term, and I was going to Google what the dictionary actually defines as cognition. I suppose I could do that on my phone real quick. And I hope I have my sound off on my phone. I do. That's good, because that was embarrassing last time when that rang. Cognition. All right. Definition. Okay, so cognition, it is the mental process of knowing, includes aspects as awareness, perception, reasoning, and judgment, or that which is known as perception, reasoning, or intuition, knowledge or certain knowledge from a personal view or experience, perception, or cognizance. So cognition is like a global term. It's like I would say it's more like just a general descriptive term of a lot of what I also call thinking processes. So when you think about your thinking processes, right, you have lots of different things, and we're not talking about IQ or intelligence, right? We're not talking about a person's intellect, their capacity. Cognition develops all the way from the time that we're born all the way, and it's only matured when we're about 25 years old. And when we're developing, our cognition starts out with developing abstract things, right? We understand, I'm sorry, not abstract things. We start with the very concrete. We learn shapes, colors, right? Red and blue, and we learn how to discriminate between those things. That's cognition and visual perception. We learn how to recognize letters and how to say words, and all of that falls into our cognition as we're starting to develop, right? And so when a person's through their developmental phases, so when we're developing, we physically develop, and then we also mentally or cognitively develop. When we get to be an adult, our thinking processes have finished developing. We're not changing in the sense of that we're still learning new information or we're still learning new things, and we get to a point where our cognition is finished. So when we're thinking in terms of dementia or cognitive loss or changes, where we really start with is what's known as the and I'm not on my cognitive best today, so cognition comes and goes, it fluctuates. It's executive functioning. Okay, so when we think of people changing over time as they start to have changes in their cognitive abilities, the first stuff that tends to go, memory is a part of it, but the first stuff that tends to go is what's called the executive functions. So under executive functions, and I'm gonna read some of this because it's just, like I said, today's not my best day. I woke up at 4:30 spontaneously, so 4:30 Eastern time. I've been up since then, and now my thinking's not the best. And so even when we are normal or fairly normal, we have trouble with our thinking processes. So what are executive functions? So executive functions are if you want to think about executive functions as like the CEO of the brain, the CEO of the brain works on everything that you would, whoops, and there I bumped something, everything that you would work on regarding what's known as the higher level things, the things that have to do with being able to typically start to go to college or run a business or drive a car or all of these higher level things, right? So some of the things that fall under executive functioning is working memory. So working memory is a little bucket. It's a little bucket of a place where we can put up to 5 to 8 pieces of little information into this bucket that we manipulate around and that we can use to do things with. Most normal people, their working memory lasts for about 30 seconds to a minute. So it's a storage space. Like if you're working on the computer, before you hit save, and I'm not talking about things that auto save like Google Drive and stuff like that, right? But if you're working on a document and you're typing and you need to save it, right? Before you hit save, that's working memory. Okay, so our working memory can take 5 to 8 pieces of information. We use this for things like writing down a phone number or trying to remember something from one side of the house to the other before you can write it down, like you wanted to you've got a list that you want to start, and you're in the bathroom and I need toilet paper, I need tissues, and I need toothpaste, right? Toilet paper, tissues, toothpaste, toilet paper, tissues, toothpaste. You're walking down the hall saying toilet paper, tissues, toothpaste until you get to your piece of paper where you can write it down. You used your working memory. Or somebody gives you a phone number, 3210648, 3210648, 3210648. Okay, until you can get to the place where you can write it down, that's when you're using your working memory. So one of the first parts of executive functioning is working memory. So the next one is the ability to manage time. Okay, and then we have emotional regulation. So going back to the ability to manage time, how that starts to come out is when, if you start to lose your ability to manage time, you start to lose the ability to necessarily be on time for appointments, or you don't know how long it takes to do something, so you think that it's going to take you an hour to do your laundry or your dishes or whatever, and it takes you 10 minutes, and then you're like, frustrated. Or the other way around, you think it's only going to take 10 minutes to do something, and then it takes an hour, and then you're late to do something else. A way we test this, for example, is one of the questions on one of the tests I use with people is, you have a 1 o'clock doctor's appointment. It takes you 45 minutes to get to your doctor's appointment. What is the latest you can leave your house to be there by 1 p.m.? So if a person has trouble with time management, they actually cannot figure that out. Sometimes they'll tell you 12:45. The correct answer is 12:15. Or if they say you got to leave by 12 because you like to be at your appointment earlier, as long as there's a 40-minute drive time, you can score it correctly. So time management goes out of the window, which is also one of the reasons why when people have dementia, they have trouble with time management when they have no concept of time. And so they will think it's been hours since somebody left, and it was minutes, and it's like you come back in and they're like, where were you? I didn't know where you were. Well, you just walked out to go get the mail and came back right in. Or the opposite, right? You're gone for hours and they come in and they're like, oh, you're back already? They lose the concept of time. So time management falls under executive functioning. Then we have emotional regulation, right? So emotional regulation, we have two types of emotional regulation. We have people who are controlled by everything going on around them, right? They take their cues off of the environment, and so they cannot control their own emotions, and so they'll respond to something the whole entire time. Whereas, for example, people who can control their own emotions, who control it internally, they're much more on an even keel. They don't get as frustrated with things. So when normal people sometimes have trouble with their own emotional regulation, right? When my kids were developing, and they were at the point where they I have two girls. When they started their menstrual cycles, we would actually say to them, go to the room until you can get yourself under control, because it's not acceptable behavior, right? Because they couldn't control their emotions at that time. Hormonal, absolutely, but it's a good example of emotional regulation. Then we have cognitive flexibility. Cognitive flexibility is the ability to switch back and forth between different things or different rules. And so a good example, we all use cognitive flexibility every single day to kind of go back and forth between different things. So when you're playing a game and the rules change, you have to be flexible in your thinking. Well, every single day, our day is not the same, right? Our rules change, or the rhythm changes, or the routine changes. And so when you lose the ability to go back and forth between different tasks, then you to a large extent, that's an executive functioning task. One of the ways that we can test this too is by saying like 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D. Okay, now let's do that backwards. 4D, 3C, 2B, 1A. Okay, I changed the rules, so now I have to use a different set of rules. So that's cognitive flexibility. So something else that's under the executive functioning umbrella is planning. And nobody's asking me questions. Everybody likes to listen to me just talk, but that's really scary. Somebody ask me a question. So back to planning. So planning, a definition of planning is a conscious or deliberate specification of a sequence of actions aimed at achieving a purpose or a goal, right? So we all plan. If you think about higher level thinking things, right? If we're running a household, we have to plan our meals, we have to grocery shop, we have to plan that, or we got to write down what we need. When we're planning a meal, we have to be able to sequence it through. If we want to eat dinner at 6 and it's something that's going to take 4 hours, we've got to start it at 2 o'clock. All of these things have to do with planning. So when people start to have trouble with dementia, with their executive functioning, a lot of the planning things starts to fall apart, right? They don't, medication, right? You got a lot of planning and organization with medication management. You got to know what medicines you take. You got to know when to reorder your medications. Some medications you got to go see the doctor again, right? You got to go back to the doctor. You got to make an appointment. All of these things are the planning things. And LLD, can you tell me what LLD means? Barb, that would be helpful. Sometimes I don't always know what the initials for things are, and maybe if I stop and think a little bit, I can get it. So anyway, that's an example of planning. So then, forethought. So under executive functions, we have forethought. So what is forethought, right? So forethought means the ability to look ahead, to look consequences of your actions, to be able to see what's coming. And where forethought comes, we use a lot of forethought when we're driving, which is why driving with dementia, as your cognition starts to change, which is one of the reasons. There are a lot of reasons why driving with dementia is not a good idea. But we're just going to, say forethought, because if you don't know how to think ahead and say, well, if I pick this, this is what's going to happen, or if I pick this, this is what's going to happen. It means that you struggle with your planning and with your processing and so on. People sometimes, a good example, or a strategy games oftentimes use forethought. And one of the ones that we can use is dots and boxes, where you have nine little dots, 3 across, 3 down, and the idea or the goal is for people to make the most blocks. And so any kind of strategy games, you can look at people's forethoughts. Then another part of executive functioning is learning from consequences, right? Lewy body dementia, LBD. Yeah, LBD I can do, but I did not know what LLD was, so I know that was probably a typo. But thank you, Barb, for clarifying that. So part of our executive function is being able to learn from things that have happened to us, right? Which is why in the teenage years, people struggle with, they've got sometimes to learn the hard way, right? So learning from consequences, if you start to have trouble with that, you get surprised every single time because you keep doing the same thing because you haven't learned that that's going to be that result, right? Another way to look at it is anticipating the secondary consequences of your actions. And so where that comes into play is, like, for example, with driving, knowing that if you drink and drive, you might be able to, you may cause a car accident, get a DUI. So learning from consequences, or learning, having secondary anticipating the secondary consequences of things are kind of the same thing. Then the next one is organization. And so under organization and planning walk hand in hand. So when you have trouble with planning and trouble with organizing, it becomes very difficult to do things like housekeeping or bill paying or medication management, because they all walk together. And then the last one is reconstitution of information. So when people tell you something, you got to filter through your head, and then you get told you got to go to the store and buy 3 items, and or you tell your loved one to go to the store and buy 3 items. They come back, they've bought 3 totally different items because the information went in and they weren't able to reconstitute it on the other side and come back with the right information. So a good practical example of reconstitution of information is the game, the old-timey game of telephone, right, where you sit a whole group of people, you tell one thing, and you see what comes out on the other side. So back to Jack's original question, which was, what does cognition mean? I kind of went into what executive functioning is. And so to answer his question, Jack, a little clearer after giving that little dialogue, is that a lot of times people can sit and have conversations and they can be pretty logical, but then for whatever one of these reasons, it is why it doesn't stick. So that was the first question. So my guess would be that, you know, my guess would be some of what I know about Ruth. I know she plays the piano, so that's a highly developed skill, and I'm glad you have her do that because it's extremely good for her brain. But where she, if she was somebody who could play sight reading, or those kinds of things, putting things back together again and actually doing those, that's where some of it might fall apart. Or if she was somebody who used to write music, right? Those higher level things. So I don't know if that really answered your question, Jack, but you can definitely let me know, because I'll tag you in this and then you can let me know. And so the follow-up question was, how come even with huge loss of memory do some things penetrate and stick, and then loads of questions go around and around that point? So sometimes things just click for whatever reason at that time. And so I don't know why, because our brain is phenomenal. We have on and off times, we have good times and we have bad times. Like today definitely is not one of my smarter, brighter days. I'm definitely more tired than I have been because I woke up at 4 o'clock. So maybe on a day when her memory's not as impaired, things can go in a little bit more, and then she kind of gets stuck on that point. So all right, so Donna online online asked, why do they sit with their eyes closed? Mom says she's not sleeping, just closing her eyes. Donna, that's a great question, but I think I've seen that a lot. I see it a lot with people, especially if there's a lot going on around them. If the television is a bad thing, people. TV, I do home health still. I work in people's houses. I walk into people with severe dementia's house, and the television is on blaring, and the person is sitting there with their eyes shut. And you can tell, that they're not actually asleep, but they've got their eyes shut. And so part of it to me seems like, they're not really watching the television. The TV is there, it's making a noise, it's on, but they're not actually like paying attention to what's being said. They're not following the dialogue. It's just noise in the background. And so I think people do it because they get overstimulated. They shut their eyes, they try to shut it out. And it's a very passive activity. So I think they do that. I think they do that sometimes because they're bored, but they don't necessarily really know how they cannot initiate doing things on their own anymore. So when I'm bored, I get up and do something. Go do the laundry, or I sit and pay my bills, or go clean up my kitchen, which still needs to be done today. When I run out of things to do, I grab my book, I read. I will sit and watch a television program. I have a continuing ed thing that I'm doing right now. So I initiate to go do something. People with dementia, oh, after a certain point, they lose the ability to actually initiate and go do something. So what you might be able to try, Donna, is just see if you can engage her for short periods of time in something else, like take her away from there to a kitchen table and say, here, let's do something together. Just because I think they get bored. I know that I would get bored. So yeah, there's a lot that can be said about that. Sometimes they are sleeping. I think that happens too. So, Donna, I hope that answered your question. Gina said her mom always puts her clothes on overclothes, and it's in the 80s in Florida. Is this normal? Yes, it is very normal. So what's probably happening, Gina, in response to your particular mom, is that she'll they they don't understand they've put clothes over clothes. It might just be a behavior. She may be cold. I don't know. I mean, if the older people tend to feel colder sooner than what we would. You said, how old is your mom? But anyway, like if you go into a nursing home in the summer, I'll just use a nursing home as an example. The air in the nursing home is probably at 76, but it's uncool. And every single elderly person in that nursing home will have on 3 or 4 layers of clothes because they're cold. They are not moving as much. They're definitely not, getting warm. And we that are working there were, hey Laura, we that are working there would get hot, and so we have short sleeves on and we're hot, and the person who is sitting there is cold. So that could be one thing. She could be cold. The other reason that she could be putting her clothes on over clothes is because she really, really doesn't understand what she's doing. I've seen that happen a lot. Mom's 84, so she might be cold. You could experiment with that and just ask her if she's cold. But I definitely think that, part of it can be just a behavior. She could be seeing the clothes laying out, and then just putting clothes on top of clothes. But there are lots of situations why somebody puts clothes on top of clothes. At least she's not just taking them all off. That happens too. So, how are you, Miss Laura? And you are not late, since this is a voluntary thing and we just show up if we show up. So Marcy had asked, does a lot of commotion going on in the room, like people talking, TV going on, kids playing, etc., make things worse for our loved one? Absolutely, it can make them worse, in all sorts of reasons. And so people with dementia lose the ability to be able to pay attention or filter through things. So when you're paying attention, has different things. We have sustained attention, right? Paying attention to something, like I am trying desperately today, since my brain is not working real well, Laura, to pay attention to what I'm doing. So we have selective attention, right? So selective attention is the ability to pay attention to one thing over something else. So when the television's on in the background, and we are having a conversation, you and I are having a conversation, but the TV's blaring over here and I'm trying to pay attention to the person that I'm talking to. That's selective attention. I have to filter out this noise over here and pay attention to the person that I'm talking to. So when people with dementia lose that ability, they actually lose the ability to filter out the stuff in the background. So when they cannot filter that out and you're trying to get them to do something, or there's so much going on around them, the kids playing the TV on, etc., they come unglued. Sometimes, not everybody has the same behaviors. So I would say that if you notice your loved one ramping up because of things going on in the extraneous environment, definitely cut it down. Don't be trying to have a conversation or something where they actually have to pay attention to you with a bunch of stuff going on, because they can't they for love nor money can't tune out that kid sitting there with the block on the floor banging away. So yeah, commotion is usually never helpful. I agree. So yes, Marcy, it can make things worse for you. So Moira had a question. I don't see any other questions online, so if anybody has a question, please throw it out there, because Moira's question is the last one I have on my sheet from people asking questions earlier. It sounds like she was sick this past week, and I'm just putting things together. It sounds like she was sick this week, and her family members didn't necessarily recognize that she was getting ill, and that she would have hoped that they would have noticed, that she was getting ill. So, Moira, what I can tell you is that you need to have conversations with your family. And tell them, that any kind of an infection, any kind of a sore throat, you may not think to tell them that you have a sore throat or a fever or whatever, and they need to be paying attention to your signs and symptoms, since I know that you have shared with us in this group before that you yourself have vascular dementia. So you need to make sure that the people around you understand that these are not things that you can do for yourself anymore. So I would definitely encourage you to try to get your family members who may not know as much about dementia yet, because I know you're researching it, to get them to start to understand, give them some books to read, perhaps give them some videos that they could watch as well. Laura said redirection, space, a quiet space for your person in the house, and is a great way to gain attention and help you. Yes. So Donna said mom has been living with her for about a year, and mom panics if she's not within her sight. She says that I thought you left me. I do assure her that I won't leave her. I have kept a daily journal on mom since day one, and I see a difference in just 1 year. Yes. Yes, I agree, Laura. I love it when people journal. You need to start, if you're listening to this and you haven't been doing this, you need to do a behavior journal, or it has a lot of different names, but pretty much write down everything, because over time you can kind of start to see what's going on. But Donna Beck, I don't know if you were right at the beginning when I was answering the questions on executive functioning. What you're describing there has to do with the time management thing that we were talking about. Your mom, as people progress through dementia, they really lose a concept of time, right? And so in her mind, you might have been gone for hours, like literally you walk out to the mailbox, right, and come back in, and because she has no concept of time anymore, she feels like that is hours. And so because she has probably an anxiety or a sense of awareness that things aren't right or aren't the same anymore, that she truly feels like she's gone, that you're gone. I read in a book recently, you can try a timer. Like if it's only going to be, like you need to go put away the laundry and it's going to take you 5 minutes. Put a timer on for her and say, Mom, when this timer runs out, I'll be right back. Just keep looking at the timer. You're just going to have to try different things. And yes, reassuring her over and over again, that is the best thing that you can do for her. But she's not going to remember it from time to time. But look to the feelings behind it. So what I read from what you're saying there is that she feels anxious when she doesn't know. You're her safety blanket. So she feels anxious when she doesn't know where you are because she knows you keep her safe. I know you're doing a phenomenal job with your mom. I can just tell off of our previous interactions and comments. So, anybody have any other questions on there? Or else I will just sit and ramble. And I really don't want to ramble today because my brain is not working so well. Laura, I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning and it's like 12:40 and yeah. So, today is not Lizette's best cognitive functioning day. So, what we talked about today was executive functioning. Let's see if anybody else throws a question at me. Otherwise, today may just be 45 minutes instead of an hour, which is also okay. This is just for benefit to whoever else is out there. I do know that there are people who have, I think Laura mentioned last time that she has a behavior log, start a behavior log with people. If you want to, Laura, you can throw a link to your behavior log on here. If you have that handy, you can do that, then people can get that. Otherwise, you can just maybe message Laura, you can message me. Hi, Nishita. Great to have you here. You have any questions today? Lizette's running out of things to say. But anyway, if anybody wants a behavioral journal, you can buy them on Amazon. You can just look up behavioral journal. Dementia Behavioral Journal. I'm very sure that you could find that. I have one that I could download. I could send you via messenger if you needed it. Laura has one. They're not hard to make. You literally just need a piece of paper and write down everything as it happens. They're helpful. Behavior journals are especially helpful if you're having people with negative behaviors or you're having people with behaviors that you need to try to figure out what's triggering them. Negative behaviors. So we'll talk about negative behaviors since nobody's thrown a question at me. I will just keep rambling. And so today let's talk about negative behaviors. So negative behaviors, we call them negative behaviors. Other words for them are catastrophic events or episodes. There are lots of different words that we can use for Houston, there's a problem. Something happened, right? So usually we see the behavior. That's what we focus on because that's the thing that is all of a sudden needing to be focused on, right? So they always have three components. There's always a before, there's a during, which is the behavior, and there's an after. So what we respond to is that behavior, right? But if you start to diarize, if you start to keep a behavior journal, be very specific. What was going on? What time of day was this? Were they tired? Had they eaten? Did they need to go to the bathroom? Had they just come back from the bathroom? Who was in the room? Was the TV on? Be specific. Diarize everything and see over time if you can figure out what the trigger is, because behavior is trying to communicate something to you. People, when they start to have when they have any type of behavior, they're trying to tell you something. They communicate with you regarding trying to tell you something. They can't necessarily tell you, I got a hangnail. My toenail is hurting, or I'm constipated, or I'm hurting, or I'm hot, or I'm cold, or any number of things. So the behavior that they show is always trying to communicate something. So be the dementia detective, try to write things down and figure out. So it's the antecedent, the behavior, and then the consequence. So the consequence can be, anything like, they blew up off the handle, and they stormed out of the room, and the consequence to that was they weren't thinking clearly and they fell. So it's always the before, the during, and the after, or the A, B, C, the antecedent, the behavior, and then the consequence of the behavior. So Nishita said, so your mom is very negative and you have a question about her negativity. So yeah, people are different. Every person's different, and we when we are feeling well And when there's nothing wrong with us, and think about yourself, how much do you filter? I know I filter a lot. You don't want to know what I think. Um, I don't want to know what other people think about me, because I'm very sure people filter, what they think about me. Or I know that I filter things that I don't want other people to know. I might be thinking one thing and saying something else because it's socially acceptable. So what happens over time with people with dementia is that their filter goes. They have no more filter. So your mom might have been inherently, a few things come to mind. Dementia can cause massive personality changes. So a person was always positive and upbeat and great, and then when you look back, the first thing that they know, that you can maybe trace back, was the change in their personality. They became very negative, pessimistic, anxious, just a change in their behavior. So it could be that. It could just be that her personality has changed. A lot of times with dementia, depending on where in the brain it's affected, more like if it's a vascular dementia and it's more in the part of the brain that's in the frontal lobe, it can control your personality side, those kinds of things. So it could just be the whole atrophy of the brain, but people's personalities do change. So she might have been negative her whole entire life, but had a filter on top of it, so you didn't necessarily notice it. Or she was very positive and her personality changed and now she's just very negative. So yes, behavior changes, negativity, those are very, very common with people with dementia. Did that answer your question, Nishita? I don't know more about your mom or what that can be. Try to redirect her, try to give her things to engage her back into her environment, try to keep her, I don't want to say keep her busy with just busy work, because, to me, that's the stupidest thing on earth, keeping somebody busy. Like, excuse me, Laura, I'm gonna talk about my own profession. But like when I'm in a therapy gym and I see people putting in pegs into a pegboard, I'm like, what the heck are we doing this for? Sometimes it's appropriate because they really cannot follow any other instructions, but not busy. Don't keep her busy just to keep her busy, but engage her back in her environment. Try to give her meaningful things to do, things that are meaningful to her. Things that, and we have a tendency with people with dementia in believing that they cannot help out anymore. They can. We have to change how we're doing it with them. So that brings me to, the next thing. I actually have a course starting on Monday night at 7 o'clock on how to engage people in meaningful activities. And so, if you're interested in that, I want you to message me privately and I can send you the information. It's a 4-week group. The purposes of the course, and it is not a free course, it is a paid course, I will just say that up front. But the purposes of the course is I do go into the different stages of dementia, what you're looking for at each stage, so you can kind of get somebody in the right stage, because you need to kind of know their stages of dementia in order to present the activities, the meaningful activities, to them in the correct way, so you don't frustrate them, that it's not too easy, that it's not too difficult, that you come up with just the right challenge for the person so that you can keep them meaningfully engaged in their environment. And so I go into how to identify what is the right challenge, how to take different activities, things like craft activities, things like sports activities, things like self-care, higher level self-care. Even just because somebody is having trouble with it doesn't mean that they cannot help you out with it. So this course, like I said, is going to be 4 weeks. Monday nights, it's in a private Facebook group. Just shoot me a message if you're interested in it. I think it'll be very fun. I think it'll be interesting for anybody who wants to be a part of that. That's great. Otherwise, no big deal. It's just something I feel that's very important. My background is an occupational therapist, and ironically, growing up in South Africa, but ironically going to school in South Africa, the thing that we've most focused on was being able to take these activities and break them down so that people can, so that you can give it to the person at the right stage, because there's nothing more frustrating than they're not able to sorry, Nishita, I just read your comment, so thank you. And yes, she has no filter. Yes, my inhibition switch does not always work well either, can you tell? So we only have about 10 minutes unless anybody has another question. I'm going to type in my email address. I think I can't type. You see, this is divided attention. I cannot talk and type at the same time. So divided attention, we were talking about attention earlier today. Divided attention is when you're supposed to divide your attention between two things. Well, I can only focus on my email address, so I will do that real quick. Think Different, Dementia at gmail.com. And then I also have a Facebook group, Think Different. Can't type. Dementia is my private Facebook group. I'd love for you guys to join the Facebook group. As I'm growing it, it hasn't grown very well yet, or it hasn't grown very. It's grown. It's definitely grown, but it's definitely not 40,000 people, nor do I really want it to be 40,000 people, because I want to get to know the people in the group. So if you're not in the group, please join, reach out, get to know me. My purpose is to educate people regarding dementia, to educate people regarding cognition. I think Donna mentioned here, it helps knowing and understanding the stages. I find in my conversations with people, people don't understand why the stages of dementia are so important. It's like, well, we know they're going to decline. Well, the stages of dementia, yeah, I'm looking forward to it too, Donna. Thank you so much for joining it. The stages of dementia are so important, because if you know the stages of dementia, then you can appropriately help your loved one and you not get frustrated thinking, but why aren't they doing this? Why can they not help me with this? Because each of those stages kind of helps guide you through what's going on and how their thinking processes have changed. And then if you understand the stages of dementia and how it occurs, and if you understand what we started with today's conversation on executive function, so two things. If you know the developmental phases, so the fast staging one, which is functional, I can never remember what it stands for. Laura's probably going to help me with that, because I'm really not good at remembering these things. I know it is the fast, and I have it written down, so I will look at it. Let's see, the adapted fast. I love the adapted fast. The fast scale was designed by Dr. Barry Reisberg, and it stands for functional assessment staging tool. So if you understand the fast and the adapted fast, and if you understand developmental processes, the fast is actually it's a retrogenesis. It uses the developmental stages to help stage people with dementia. So when you understand developmental and the fast and the stages of dementia, and if you understand executive functions and what they mean, and like I started out the conversation earlier today, we're not talking about intellect, we're not talking about IQ, we're talking about thinking processes. And if you truly understand these two things, then it's easier for you to understand, why is mom negative all the time? Why does mom ask me 2 seconds after she's asked me? Why does she ask me the same question? Why does mom freak out when I'm out of the room for 5 minutes when I just told her, I'm going to go get the mail, and I come back and she's anxious and worried? When you start to put those pieces together, and Donna, this is what that's really part of what I'm going to be doing in this course, is really diving into that. When you understand that and you have that frame of reference, and I'll be giving handouts and things like that for that. But when you understand those things, then you on your own can start to anticipate what's coming next, and you can start to anticipate how to help your loved one. And then when things start to change, then you're ahead of the curve and it's not a surprise, and it can make such a big difference, I think, in how we help our loved one and how we work with them. So yet again, my name is Lizette. My background is an occupational therapist. I also have my own business called Think Different Dementia, which is, I named it Think Different Dementia because I want people to think differently about dementia. I want people to be educated about dementia. I also educate people about how to prevent your own cognitive loss and things that we can do to actively change and facilitate our own thinking processes, what influences our thinking processes. So Think Different Dementia and the Think Different Dementia group are really focused on trying to educate people. So it is about 5 till 4 minutes till. I don't see any other questions on here. Thank you guys for joining today. I try to tag people when I put them. If you guys send me questions throughout the week, then I write them down on a piece of paper so you don't have to wait for this. You can send me the questions earlier on. You can email me. You can private message me. There are lots of ways that you can reach me. And if you want to work with me one-on-one, I do that too for people. I've got a lot that I can help you with. So please feel free. English, Lizette. Please feel free to reach out to me and ask me questions. Please feel free to reach out to Laura. Laura is also a great resource. I know she won't mind me saying that. She is a nurse practitioner. She has her own business. She also absolutely specializes in dementia and dementia care. So if you guys have questions, reach out to me, reach out to Laura. And thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Yet again, today is I really need to go sleep. Today is November the 14th, 2020, and my name is Lizette, and thank you for joining me this afternoon, and I hope you guys reach out, and I hope you guys join my group. Have a wonderful afternoon, blessings, and I will see you